Hi, my name is Marc and welcome to Diversita Connect. Today, we're going to talk about how can I help my child find a job? And what we're going to do is highlight some key webinars that hopefully will be useful for some of the parents that are joining Diversita Connect in terms of looking at with their older children or young people and thinking, okay, these are the type of things that might be able to just nudge us in the right direction or give a little bit of extra advice around job searches. So what we've done in Diversita Connect over the last year or so is just built up a pool of well over 100 webinars now. So what I decided to do was to look back at those and with a lot more parents joining the platform, just thinking what ones are the most relevant. So there's a lot more on here that will be relevant, but we thought we'd highlight a few today. So hopefully this will be useful. So a few caveats really or guidelines around this. So a lot of the material we do is obviously aimed at young people 18 plus. When I say that, some of the content may be relevant to those parents or young job seekers starting to think about their strengths. So we've got some webinars around identifying strengths, of course, and other things in there about self-advocacy and self-promotion and reasonable adjustments and all these other areas. But ultimately, a lot of our material is produced for 18 plus. And I would say really, when we're looking at obviously some of the key pieces of advice you see out there or key programs like Connect to Work, they're all 18 plus as well. So these are a starting point. And of course, we'll evolve this advice over time. And we're always keen to make sure that we take ideas from our community. We keep an eye out on any new initiatives or new pieces of assistance or guidance to highlight to our community. What I will say again, and obviously we apologise for this, but the advice is very UK centric. We're based in the UK, and it's quite difficult to get everything together across all of the geographical regions. But of course, we're always keen to hear about other subjects. So if there's a particular initiative going on in your local authority or borough, or there's a charity that's helping or something that you think could be useful, we'd love to hear it as well. So what we're going to do is just go through some of the webinars at a very high level. But obviously, we would highly recommend you go and watch these webinars on the platform. What we're looking to do as well is put all of our back catalogue on podcasts. So hopefully this will, all of the ones that we're highlighting today, we're going to get onto our podcast channel so you can listen to them as well. So however you're watching this or listening to this today, we'd like to think that we will hopefully catch up in terms of podcasts that will reflect all of these. However, as a Diversita Connect member, you get access to all of these webinars for free. So again, I suppose our flagship webinar really, and we've got 3 versions of this, is identifying neuro-inclusive companies. And this is a webinar that I'm really proud of, because what we do here is we essentially pass on the information that we use at Diversita when we're trying to find clients or organizations to work with. So we've got the intro one, which is actually lesson 4 or webinar 4 that was released way back in sort of February of 2025. We did a sequel or a part 2 to this. Part 2 is probably more appropriate than sequel. Where what we did is we went through a case study or an application to see how when you've identified a company, what do you do next, right? And that process. And then we've got an update for 2026, which is fairly recent. So I definitely recommend checking out all of our Identifying Neuro-Inclusive Companies webinars. As I say, we're really proud of these, but always looking to try and update them. Another webinar that we think could be really useful, and it's certainly got highlighted to me recently by a parent I was talking to, is recognizing your strengths. Now, it seems fairly consistent, not all the time, of course, so I don't want to generalize, but it's fairly consistent that a lot of neurodivergent students are not really given the opportunity to think about their strengths too much, or they have expectations stripped back a little bit or managed quite carefully. But there's a lot of focuses sometimes on the things that they will struggle with. And now that's a big part of being neurodivergent. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be idealistic here, right? We understand that there's a lot of adjustments and sometimes support that people need. But there's also a lot of strengths that people have, and recognizing those strengths and starting to think about those is very, very important. So webinar 10 that I did with my niece, Hannah O'Brien, is definitely worth a watch on that basis. And we're looking to update this one again since. The other one, which I think could be quite useful, or two in this instance, is CV length and structure. So getting your CV together is of course important as a job seeker. It's still the primary way of applying for roles. It's starting to change and evolve a little bit, which is great to see. But I will say that for the most part, CV length and structure is still going to be quite important, and getting that structure right. So this is quite a transferable webinar, really, as in it's pretty, I'd say, pretty applicable for most people who are starting their job search, regardless of neurotype. I worked in recruitment a long time, so I have a pretty good idea of what a CV looks like. So webinars 11 and 13 are CV length structure part 1 and part 2, right? So definitely worth checking these out and starting to build your document and CV in what I consider the right way, and in a way that's going to make it palatable for organizations to get to know you very, very quickly. We do touch on a few things like disclosure, and I suppose how you communicate your neurotype if you want to disclose. So, but ultimately, this is really about the structure of your CV. Another really interesting one, and I really enjoyed doing this was we're looking at neurodiversity hiring programs, and are they a good thing? So in this webinar 47, what we cover is we look at ring-fence programs. So for example, there's a company called DXC, which is a technology company. They've got something called Dandelion Projects. EY had the Neurodiversity Center of Excellence. I think we cover Orsikon in there and a few others. Now, what I will say is we give a bit of an overview of the ones that are out there, and try to give some advice on what we think of them. But what they are is ultimately a really good opportunity for you to feel safe to disclose, right? But the idea of having ring fence programs is quite a polarizing opinion, right? So your polarizes opinion, because it's almost like you're trying to sort of segment people a little bit too much in organizations, rather than trying to incorporate these skills and strengths and different ways of working into your organization. So there's pros and cons with this, right? But I think ultimately what we do in this is just go through the ones that are out there, give our own opinion, of course, but you know what? Sometimes it's worth just applying to them and seeing where it goes, right? So check out webinar 47 and have a look at some of these programs, and just keep an eye out for any other new ones that are coming through, and we'll make sure that we try to highlight those as well. With that in mind, there is a government scheme called Disability Confident or Disability Committed employers, right? So Disability Committed is essentially something where you go on the government website and you fill in a very, very short application, and you essentially make a pledge, right? Nothing more than that. You haven't got to show any guarantees or anything like that, but you essentially make a pledge to say that you are going to stick to various guidelines around supporting disabled and neurodivergent individuals or applicants or job seekers that come to your company. Now, so one of the key things is that if someone has the skills to do the job, you almost guarantee them an interview. It just stops short of saying absolute guarantee, but it's almost like you'll do all you can to make sure that person has an interview. So with Disability Committed, there's various levels. So Confident is the one that we cover here, but there's others after that. There's one called Employer, and I can't remember the other one offhand, but there's 3 levels essentially. But the first one, there's nearly 18,000 companies in the UK, and we've what we've done on webinar 61, when you go into it, there's an Excel document which has got a list of all of these companies. And what's great about this doc is that you can segment it down to your region, company types, company sizes, all these other bits and pieces. And I suppose what we're trying to say here is that these companies on paper, and it's very much on paper, right? Because I wouldn't say that they will all stick to it. They should be relatively safe to disclose your neurotype 2 and ask for additional support in the interview and application process. They should also, and no one said, and I can't guarantee they will, but they should, if you have the right skills to do the job you're applying to, almost guarantee you an interview, particularly the bigger organizations. So have a look at this webinar and see what you think, because I think this one, again, could be quite useful going forward. And it's a little bit intertwined with identifying neuro-inclusive companies, but what we think is, okay, we want you to almost call out companies on the pledges they're making very, very visibly. So if you go onto any of these company websites, they'll probably have a little badge at the bottom of the website saying Disability Committed or Disability Confident or whatever it is, whatever level they are. If they have that, then really I would be, if I was applying as an ND job seeker, I would be saying, look, I feel safe to disclose because you're disability committed or you're disability confident or whatever level they are. That's why I'm disclosing to you. Really appreciate that you're doing this great work for the ND community or disabled community. And you put in your application in. So when you do that, you'd like to think that they will see that, hopefully resonate with it, and stick to the type of pledges that they were supposed to make in the first place. Okay. The other webinars that I think could be quite interesting is Connect to Work. So Connect to Work is a relatively new government initiative that is only really starting to kick in 2026 and maybe the tail end of 2025. But webinars 75 and 101 cover Connect to Work in a little bit more detail. The first one being generally what is Connect to Work at a very high level. The second one is going through the application process and looking how you check eligibility, etc. Now, in Bromley, near where I live, I've met the Connect to Work team and they're fantastic. And I've just got really high hopes for this program. I've seen a lot of programs over the last 4 years of Diversita, and they come in and out. And we've had things like the Buckland Report, which now seems to have disappeared in other government initiatives. This is the one which has got a lot of financial backing, a lot of infrastructure put around it. And it's a genuine need around this, right? It really is. The job centre are so fantastic in terms of how hard they work, but they cannot manage the caseloads that people are coming through, and they can't give the bespoke specific help that a lot of individuals that are applicable for or sort of eligible for Connect to Work would have would probably need, right? So check out webinars 75 and 101. I think they could be of interest, and particularly if you have a child who is 18 plus and is starting to think about work, or is maybe stuck in a little bit of limbo in terms of how do they apply, how do they get support, etc. Could be quite useful. The next webinar we have is webinar 106, which is being a parent of an ND child. Hopefully this will resonate. This is actually my personal story of being a parent of a neurodivergent child, and some of the pathways we had to go through, and I suppose where we are today, as well as of 2026. So again, we're always quite keen to make sure that we share our own experiences and where we can. We try not to sort of labour that point too much. Of course, hopefully it's known by now why we set up Diversita and why we have Diversita Connect and all of these other things. What we want to do is just make sure we offer practical help and support wherever we can, right? We can't solve every problem and solve every issue and solve every challenge, but we try where we can, right? But I think hopefully this will give you a bit more of an idea about our why, some of the things that hopefully have sort of shaped where we are today. And I'm sure there's a lot of crossover with your own experiences as parents. So yeah, please check out webinar 106 as well. So next steps, and obviously thank you so much for watching this one today, and hopefully these webinars will all be a great starting point for you as parents when you're trying to give some advice to your young people looking for roles. Obviously this is in our webinar collection where you can comment and ask questions, so we'd love to see any feedback. What we do have is this goes out on a Monday at 1 p.m, and then the following Wednesday at 6 p.m. We have a live conversation around it as well. So when you see this pop up on Diversita Connect, you'll see that on the Wednesday at 6 p.m. we have a live conversation, or a live chat around this, where I jump on a call, we go through the key points in the webinar, and obviously we answer any questions. Definitely let us know, particularly if you're parents or young people looking, what type of thing you think would be useful going forward. We've got a lot of content on here, of course, but we haven't got everything, right? And things are evolving all the time. And of course, if there's a particular situation or anything you'd like some advice on, then don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to help and have a conversation as well. So thank you so much for watching today. We hope this has been useful in a bit of a starting point across our library of webinars to see how they can start to assist your sort of a neurodivergent child. But as I say, it won't cover everything. So if there's anything you want to see in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. But for now, thank you so much for watching or listening. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. And scan the QR code to join the Diversita Connect community.